The 49ers get a really nice boost that they planned for and paid for as the sun sets on this first week of 2026 free agency. Look, even a peek at the new car. Promised you guys that you get to see it. Maybe you'll see a little bit more of it in a bit, but $20.7 million of salary cap space is coming the 49ers' way. It is additional salary cap space, the second most in the league. It's called an adjustment from the 2025 season. And the reason that the 49ers are getting this big of a chunk is because they took out an insurance policy on Nick Bosa's contract for salary cap purposes, and because Nick Bosa got hurt last season, tore his ACL in week 3, the 49ers did not have his services for most of the year, and they're getting a $7.1 million salary cap adjustment as part of that $20.7 million. So this is one of the biggest adjustments that we've seen, and I think it must be noted that the 49ers purchase more salary cap insurance policies than any other team in the NFL. So they're definitely not cheap. In fact, they're willing to pay extra cash so that they can gain as many cap advantages as possible. Now, the one problem here is that they did not purchase an insurance policy on Fred Warner's contract. That's too bad, because that would have gotten them some cap money as well. But as it stands right now, we are waiting for all the final contract numbers to come in of all these signings that the 49ers have made thus far in free agency. And when we do have those final numbers, we'll know exactly how much space the 49ers have. But I went live talking about the tight situation that the 49ers are dealing with earlier on Friday morning. That relates to the Trent Williams contract. This gives the 49ers some more wiggle room. Now, there's a target carryover that the 49ers are going to want to finish this season with. For example, they carried over about $19 to $20 million of salary cap space that was unused from 2024 to 2025. I think they're going to want to carry over at least that much from this 2025, or from this season 2026 to 2027, because they have got escalating costs. So they're going to have to find the target carryover amount. That usually is a guessing game, because you don't know exactly how high the salary cap is going to be in the future, but you've got to compare that to the expenditures that you have growing in the future. And then you have to set yourself up to carry over that amount into the next season. So that's the amount of salary cap space that the 49ers need to have leaving this one. I estimate right now, based on what I know about the contracts they've given out, but I'm not sure about, I estimate that the 49ers have about $10 to $15 million in salary cap space. Now, to get over the threshold of what they'll need to carry over, maybe they need to restructure Nick Bosa, but don't treat that too seriously. That probably is going to be conversion of base salary to signing bonus. Nothing's going to change for Nick. The 49ers will just get some cap relief by pushing money out. What I said on Friday morning remains true regarding Trent Williams. That is going to be the tighter squeeze. That's the one where the numbers actually have to be adjusted. That's why an agreement has not yet been reached, because it is a pay cut in effect for Trent Williams that the 49ers are pursuing. They want, and Trent wants this too, ultimately they want a win-win. He doesn't have any guaranteed money right now, and he's not under contract through 2027. So there is a way to find this win-win. It is just trickier and trickier the older that Trent gets. But I think that it's important to clear up the misconception that the 49ers are cheap. I think that what we've seen so far out of this free agency period should have already done a very good job clearing that up. They've signed a bunch of players. They're going to continue to sign players. They still have over 20 spots left to fill on their 90-man roster. I just think that last offseason, because people didn't get that satisfaction of the signings in free agency, that seems to give people a sugar high, because that didn't come last offseason. People thought that the 49ers were holding money back. They actually ended up spending a franchise record in 2025. That was just used on their own players, on Brock Purdy, on George Kittle, and on Fred Warner, two of whom actually live here in Tennessee over the offseason. We're here in Franklin out on the farm. So the 49ers had to do that spending to set the table for this 2026 cycle, where now you see the spending happening on the outside free agents. So over the course of the next few days, definitely look forward to some of these contract details. For example, Eddie Piñeiro's deal is out. He's got $4.25 million per year in total value on the contract. Like, that total value is near 20 something, but the average of the total is 4.25. Yet they were able to keep his year one salary cap hit down at 1.91 million. Expect the 49ers to execute similar techniques with all of their deals. If even the Eddie Piñeiro deal, which is between 4 and 5 million per year, is using triple bonus structure to stretch the salary cap hit out as far as possible into the future, well, then you could be sure that every single contract that the 49ers give out is going to be trying to save some kind of salary cap room. Same mentality as the insurance. If they're willing to insure their contracts, and they insure the vast majority of the big ones, just so happened they probably didn't expect Fred Warner to get hurt for the season, because that hadn't happened before. But if they're willing to insure their contracts, they are willing to get every single salary cap advantage they can get. And that's going to translate into the 49ers being able to stock up even further over the course of this 2026 offseason. Now, other ways that the 49ers are able to get that 20.7 million, like 7 million, 7.1 million or so, was thanks to the Nick Bosa insurance. But there are also things called likely to be earned incentives and not likely to be earned incentives. And if you put a likely to be earned incentive into a player's contract, so something that he had achieved before, then that counts against the salary cap the year that you give out the contract. But if he doesn't achieve the incentive, then you get a credit for the cap the next year. So that could have been part of the adjustments for the 49ers, part of the 20 million this offseason. Conversely, if you give out a not likely to be earned incentive, which I think the 49ers have given out plenty of that to Mike Evans and possibly even Dre Greenlaw when we see his contract, it doesn't count against the near-term salary cap, but if the player achieves it, it would be charged the next season. So with all the not likely to be earned incentives the 49ers gave Mike Evans, since he didn't have all too many snaps last year, they hope that they're not getting as much back in terms of adjustments next year at this time, because that would mean that they didn't have to cash in any of their insurance policies. That would mean that they will have stayed healthier, and it also will mean that the incentives, the not likely to be earned incentives, NLTBE we call them as the acronym, that means that those will have been earned, and the 49ers obviously would be happy to pay it because they're in this to win it. They're not in it to try to hoard cap insurance money. They just have purchased those insurance policies to gain as much of a competitive advantage as possible. So, long story short, 49ers, as the sun sets on this first week of free agency, I would say free agency is about 50% done based on the amount of players who have signed elsewhere. So still a long way to go. But the 49ers, as the sun does set on this first wave, have found a way to add 20.7 million to their salary cap total. Really, really nicely done for the 49ers, and just follow along closely over the course of the next few days, because we're going to have those contract details and we'll know exactly how the 49ers have to proceed through this. You know, next week at this time, that Trent Williams $10 million option bonus is going to be due. So maybe we'll have resolution on the Trent Williams front by then, and I'll be able to appraise exactly what this all means for you once the contract numbers are in. But 20.7 million of added space certainly does not hurt.
No, it doesn't. Welcome in. So there's a couple big contractual trigger dates coming up here for the 49ers. Obviously, Trent Williams that I just talked about. Christian McCaffrey, though, on Sunday. This is something that nobody has reported yet, so I'll go ahead and report it now. Those of you who are nice and loyal enough to be here on a Friday night, you get the inside information. $10.55 million option bonus for Christian McCaffrey. He doesn't have anything guaranteed on his contract this year. $10.55 million due to be paid out to Christian by Sunday. So that is 2 days from now, March 15th. It's Friday, and by Sunday, 49ers have to commit to Christian McCaffrey for this season. Now, the thing about an option bonus is that it's paid out, and then that is essentially the primary compensation for a player in this season. That's how it's understood. The reason that you give out these big option bonuses is twofold. One, benefits the team because that money can be prorated against the salary cap. It is spread out over the course of 5 seasons. So the $10.55 million that's going to be paid in this way to Christian McCaffrey does not all hit the salary cap at once this season. But in exchange for helping the team, the player gets some semblance of security that he will not be traded in this coming season, because a team would have to eat all of that money. The acquiring team in any potential trade would not have to handle any of the $10.55 million for Christian McCaffrey. So in short, it's much harder to deal Christian McCaffrey if that's what the 49ers were thinking. I'm not saying that's what they're thinking, but I'm just explaining the contract mechanism. It's a lot harder to deal him after the option bonus kicks in, because then at that point, the team has already absorbed so much of the cost for him to play in this season that, yeah, it might be sunk cost fallacy, but guess what? Humans subscribe to sunk cost fallacy. That is something that is actually fairly common. So that is coming up for Christian McCaffrey. A ton of trigger dates in 49ers contracts are then coming up on April 1st. And while we're here today, I want to talk about Nick Bosa, because we discussed the insurance that has led to the 49ers being able to recoup $20.7 million in salary cap space. And I have now made the adjustment to the salary cap sheet. So that is something that I could show everybody up on the screen. I know that I said that we're unsure about the exact amount of salary cap space right now, but we do have an estimate, and that estimate can be found right here on the 2026 salary cap report. 14 million that I have right now. I'm still waiting for the Mike Evans exact number. We do have the Eddie Pinheiro number. I'm still waiting for the Nate Hobbs exact number. We do have the contracts for, as I said, Pinheiro and Vidarian Lowe. The salary cap hit there is only $2.2 million. And we are now crafting our 53-man roster for the 49ers. But after all is accounted for, now that the salary cap has risen with the adjustments to $340 million for the 49ers, that is $19 million of carryover plus another $20.7 million of adjustments. So I'm going to have to change this number over here on the right. It's about $39 million of additional salary cap space. Now that that is in, the 49ers project to have about $14 million left to work with. Now, as I just discussed this morning, and this has been a big finance day on the channel, and it's important to take advantage, it's important to take into account all of these numbers, because that's what's going to determine how the 49ers proceed forward financially. Most people ask me, like, the very first question that comes out of their mouth is, well, can the 49ers afford Joey Bosa? Well, first, let's talk about Nick Bosa and a crazy twist that I think ultimately might allow the 49ers to afford Joey. At this time last year, Nick Bosa hadn't yet torn the ACL that he would tear in week 3 against the Arizona Cardinals. Then Micah Parsons got traded from the Cowboys to the Packers. Then Micah Parsons signed a new mega deal that completely obliterated anything else we had seen in the edge rusher market, worth $47 million annually. It was like absolutely wild stuff happened before the start of the 2025 regular season. At the time, it seemed that Nick Bosa, if he would just stay healthy in 2025 and deliver a solid year, because he was performing at a high level up until he got hurt in week 3, it looked like if he would just stay healthy and deliver, then he would be in line to renegotiate his contract in 2026 in this offseason. He'd be in line to say, hey, I want a raise. Let's crumple this up. This is my final year of guarantees. Let's figure something out moving forward. Kind of like how the 49ers revisited the George Kittle deal. They revisited the Fred Warner deal. Obviously, they're revisiting the Trent Williams deal right now. No more guarantees left on those contracts. Even if it's not a lame duck year in the contract, if a player is good enough, he will go back and revisit that deal, and a team will generally have to oblige him once the guaranteed portion of the contract runs out. That was where Nick Bosa and the 49ers were headed. They were headed toward a massive renegotiation this offseason. But then he tore his ACL in week 3. So obviously that's off the table. Now Nick Bosa has to recover from that ACL tear. There's not going to be a renegotiation. And the 49ers are going to accept Nick Bosa's contract as is this season. I could even find this contract and get it up on the screen. For the time being, let me show you guys the salary cap hit. It is $41.6 million this year. But we're going to go to Nick Bosa over the cap. We're going to get this up on the screen. I could help illustrate exactly where the 49ers are at in terms of Bosa's contract, which, again, might be restructured in a simple way this offseason, but is not going to be renegotiated. And I'll explain the difference between those two as soon as I get this up on the screen. All right, here we go. This is Bosa's contract. We are now in the 2026 calendar year. As you can see, he's got a big base salary, and then the proration of the signing bonus is still here, and the proration of all the bonuses that have kicked in after the signing bonus are roaring at full life. They account for $8.85 million of salary cap space in 2025. Then you've got the per game roster, or 2026. Then you've got the per game roster bonus money, and it all adds up to $41.6 million in the total salary cap hit, with a guaranteed salary. It's listed here as $23.2 million. That triggered into a full guarantee on April 1st of 2025. So that's long since vested into that full guarantee. As you can see here, after the 2026 season, which is right down underneath this, no more guarantees for Nick Bosa. So he still has guarantees right now, but no more coming after 2026. 2 more years left on the deal. Massive renegotiation, obviously, right now on hold. That's something that can't happen until after the 2026 year. So this could have been viewed as a lame duck year, really, for Nick Bosa before the guarantees ran out. Obviously, it's not going to be viewed as that anymore because he's coming off the ACL tear, and it might save the 49ers some money in the short term. Now, wouldn't it be, I don't know, ironic, fitting, I don't know what the right word is, but what if the 49ers are able to scrounge up enough salary cap space to also sign Nick's brother, Joey Bosa, this offseason, because they didn't have to sit down and renegotiate Nick's deal? What if the stars align that way, and then Nick and Joey can team up, bookending edge rushers, meet at the quarterback, and win a Super Bowl for the 49ers? That would be a fairy tale ending, obviously, to the Bosa family NFL story. It probably wouldn't be the ending. Nick is still going to play for a while, but it'd be quite the chapter, wouldn't it? And I think that when a lot of people ask me, do the 49ers have enough to pay Joey? I go back and I look at Nick's deal, and I realize that the 49ers are just going to be able to run a standard restructure on it. They don't have to give him a pay raise this offseason. They don't have to renegotiate this to get up to the Micah Parsons level. And I say, well, let me look at the 49ers salary cap sheet, and I see if they do run a standard restructure on Nick Bosa's contract, they can lower his salary cap hit from 41 to about 25 million. They do give Trent Williams the extension that he's looking for right now, which we expect. They can open up upwards of $30 million in 2026 salary cap space between only Nick Bosa and Trent Williams. You can probably even open up a little bit more through a Brock Purdy restructure, but that's much smaller since his base salary isn't as big here in 2026. So as you can see, the 49ers, who carried over $20 million from 2025 to 2026, are going to be in position to carry over more than that from 2026 to 2027. The boost that they got that I told you about at the start of this show with the Nick Bosa insurance being a primary part of that has put the 49ers into really nice financial position. And what I talked about this morning before that boost came in, it really, really looked like they were pigeonholed into one course of action with Trent Williams. They probably still are financially very, very goaded into that direction. Find the extension, lower the cap hit. But it definitely isn't as dire as before this 20 million came in. This 20.7 million came in thanks to the Bosa insurance, thanks to all that. So anyway, I want to answer everybody's questions. This is really good 49ers news today. They do have more breathing room to operate. And before I take questions, I'll really close my monologue with a thought. And it is that perhaps the 49ers have exacted some leverage over Trent Williams over the course of the past week, because you think about how negotiations work and you're always trying to offer something that the other side wants, right? Trent wants to win a Super Bowl. Trent is going to be 38 years old this year. So obviously the stretch run of his career is here. He says he wants to play up until 40. Okay, fine. That's 3 more years, but you can't take anything for granted in the NFL. Trent Williams knows that. And what the 49ers have done this week is very, very efficient week of free agency. I mean, you talk about adding Mike Evans, somebody who's also in the final few years of his career. You talk about adding Osa Odighizuwa. That is a veteran, ready-made defensive tackle, but somebody still in his prime, but obviously makes the 49ers better right now. You've added offensive line depth. You've turned around. You added Nate Hobbs last night, a talented cornerback who, just last year signed for $48 million with the Green Bay Packers. You're bringing back important pieces, the pieces that you needed to bring back if you're the 49ers, like a Jake Tonjes, like a Sam Okawanu. I mean, you're doing a lot of good stuff. And as I just have illustrated, you're still in position to even add more, like a Joey Bosa. If you're Trent Williams looking at that, you see a team that is very, very clearly going for it this year. Like every single season, the 49ers have been bona fide contenders right here. Ever since 2019, they've been bona fide contenders in every single season. They've entered with a roster good enough to get some stuff done. But last offseason, they had to run the first part of the reset. So they were more vulnerable than they ever were entering the year, but they still went in and they beat Seattle and statistically dominated the eventual Super Bowl champs in week 1 before they hit all the injuries. And then obviously they fought through the injuries and they got the 13-4. But last year was the most vulnerable that the 49ers had been in a while, and they still got the 13 wins. Now, Trent, who has this wealth of NFL experience, can sit back as he's negotiating this contract, as he's trying to squeeze as much money as he can out of the situation. And he can honestly look at the situation and say, look at the team that they're building. Then he could look at his own situation and say, you know what? I really want to win a Super Bowl before this is all said and done. That's something that I haven't had a chance to do yet. Trent has talked about how painful losing a Super Bowl is. He said that he'd rather not even get to one than lose one. I mean, it took him so long. It took him months to get over the loss to the Chiefs in Super Bowl 58. So this is obviously a competitor who would really, really want a ring before all is said and done. Well, look at the operation that's going on right now in Santa Clara. Look at what the 49ers have done over this week, over these 5 days. They have, I think, firmly committed themselves to part 2, year 2 of this roster reset, which is push the chips in. That should appeal to Trent Williams. That should, in a way, give the 49ers some leverage here, because Trent wants something that the 49ers are building toward, and that is a title here in 2026. Now, people are looking at this in the big picture. It's funny to see the NFL national media has almost roundly praised the 49ers offseason so far. Another narrative that is coming from the national media right now is that the NFC West has remained the nexus of power in the NFL. The NFC West last year was the best division we had ever seen in NFL history. And I don't just toss statements like that around. You guys know I look at the data. The data was astounding for the NFC West last year. And then, you don't even have to look at the advanced stats to know that the Seattle Seahawks dominated the New England Patriots in the Super Bowl. They basically blasted through everyone in their path except for the Rams. Yet they lost to a healthy 49ers team in week 1. And obviously the Rams gave them a run for their money twice in Seattle. I would say, 3 times. The Rams beat them at SoFi Stadium, but the Rams gave them a run for their money twice in Seattle late in the season and in the NFC Championship game. I mean, that triumvirate, that 3-team core of the NFC West, because let's not talk about the Arizona Cardinals, But the Seahawks, the Rams, and the 49ers are at a very, very high level right now. And everything that we've seen so far this offseason, to me, indicates those teams are going to stay that way. Now, if there's a team that has moved backwards a little bit here during free agency, it's the Seattle Seahawks, because they've hit a little bit of a cap situation. They've had to let some guys go. The Super Bowl MVP, Kenneth Walker, is now with the Kansas City Chiefs. But I never like to firmly evaluate teams just based off free agency. That's only a part of the offseason. The NFL draft, which is a huge pool of talent acquisition, is still coming up. So we'll see where all these teams end up. But the initial read right now is that the 49ers, the Rams, and the Seahawks are all here to play. Like, they're all serious. I can't say the same about the Cardinals. Kendrick Bourne has had some hilarious quotes about the Cardinals. He signed for like $5 or $6 million a year with Arizona, and somebody asked him like who else was interested in his services, and Kendrick Bourne said that the Cardinals were literally my only bidder. And then he started laughing like Kendrick Bourne does. And it's like, did the Cardinals just, I love KB and I want KB to get all the money that he can get. But the fact that the Cardinals went out there and went into the double digits, like over a 2-year period, with nobody else bidding for the guy, they're just not a serious team next to the 49ers, next to the Rams, and next to the Seattle Seahawks. It's really, really tough to see Arizona scraping their way out with the ownership and the leadership that's in place there. Now, that being said, Mike LaFleur is the coach now, so he does deserve a fair shot, but it really does seem that Arizona is fighting an extremely uphill battle. All right, we'll see if Mike has anything to say. Yesterday, we went live, and I think Mike says that it was before I went live. He was texting me. He was like, hey, wait, don't go live. Don't go live. We have breaking news. And he said that Nate Hobbs had signed with the 49ers, but I didn't see his text until I was live for like 30 or 45 seconds. And I'm like, oh, Nate Hobbs, the cornerback, has signed with the 49ers. So I went ahead and I pivoted gears. We're, I think, going to talk about Joey Bosa at the time, but instead we talked about Nate Hobbs, the former Raider turned Green Bay Packer and latest addition to this San Francisco team. He signed a deal worth up to $4.5 million. I estimate his cap hit to be about $2 to $2.5 million for the 49ers. That's a crowded DB room, by the way. They could carry 6 cornerbacks, and right now I have Hobbs listed there at the bottom, but I could reshuffle the order. You know, special teams seems like it's going to be a major point of emphasis for the 49ers again, which is a good thing because they improved that unit from dead last, number 2 last year. That means that you're focused on guys like Saran Neal. They re-signed Luke Gifford today to a deal worth, what was it? I think 5.3 million over 2 years. So you're looking at about 2.5 per year. So probably a cap hit between 1 and 2. That is no chump change for a guy who you don't want cracking the linebacker rotation. But for a team where special teams was so important last year, and for the Seattle Seahawks it was too. I mean, special teams ended up determining, I think, the title last year. Because if the Rams had just gotten to play offense and defense against the Seahawks, the Rams would probably be the Super Bowl champion right now. But the Rams also had to play special teams, and they blew games, and they blew the big one in the regular season against Seattle because their special teams was so bad, and it led to them firing their special teams coordinator. So on one hand, the 49ers were able to stay afloat because their special teams was so good last year. On the other hand, the Rams sunk because their special teams was like a reprisal of the 2023 49ers, which is not a compliment. And on the third point, the Seattle Seahawks were even better than the 49ers on special teams. They were number 1 and the 49ers were number 2. You saw Rashid Shaheed take back the kick in the divisional round, and that game was over before it started. That really made Seattle an all-time great team in 2025. So the 49ers would be absolutely foolish if they didn't continue investing the same type of money and resources on the coaching end and special teams as they did last year. So that's why you see Luke Gifford back, and that's why you see the linebacker room so crowded. One of these guys is not going to be on the 53. And we're going to have to check in on Nick Martin's concussion issue, which had him in the protocol for a couple months at the end of last season. I don't even know for sure if he's out yet. That's something that hasn't been addressed in a while for the 49ers. So maybe he's on the outside looking in. Maybe the 49ers move a Tatum Bethune or move a D Winters. Although I do have to say, and we did a whole show about this earlier today, if Greenlaw can stay decently healthy, Winters can play the Sam, and the 49ers get better at two positions. They get better at weak side linebacker, thanks to Dre Greenlaw, and they get better at the Sam linebacker position because D Winters has moved down a peg. So I like the investment in Dre Greenlaw if the 49ers can keep it at a cap hit around $3 million, which I think they have. And that's a topic for when we actually have the contract, and I could talk about what I did at the top of this show with the not likely to be earned incentives and the likely to be earned incentives. Just know that there have been so many salary cap gymnastics performed by the 49ers over the years to get to this point, including the salary cap insurance, that this is like where they could start really benefiting now, because they've paid out more top-end contracts than any other team in the NFL. They've spent more money than any other team in the NFL over the past 10 years. Yet they still, because of some of the insurance they've taken out, because of some of the maneuvers they've done, and Parag Marate deserves a lot of credit, they still stand to be sitting in a spot where I think they could have 10 to 15 million more in 2026 spending money on backloaded deals. That is actually significant if they stretch those contracts out into the future with signing bonuses. So absolutely, they could still potentially sign somebody like Joey Bosa. This is what we got to play right now. Mike has something really good. This is the Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw reunion. We've got content for you. This is today from the 49ers building. Mike always sends the good stuff. Here we go. If it does play. Here.
Man, where is he? That boy good training, huh? Come on, you see that right here? Yes, sir.
Welcome home, baby.
I miss you. It's because of you, though.
Nah, bro, that you.
You set the tone. You set the tone.
Wow. Crazy. It's like he never left. You know who's that in the background? We're talking about the Rams. You guys know who that is? Just to the right of Fred Warner on the wall. Correct guesses only. I think some of you will know right away, right? I want to see it in the chat section before I let you guys know who it was. So this is in the draft room in Santa Clara. It's a cool little room that the 49ers have. This is their war room during the draft. But who is in that portrait just to the right of Fred Warner, to Warner's left? I'm not going to say who it is until I get a correct guess in the chat section or a correct answer. We got one person saying, Being Butterfly says no idea. We got no clue. Come on, guys. You've got to know. All right, I'm going to give you guys 10 seconds. Somebody has to know. Somebody has to know. Somebody's saying Bobby Beathard. Bobby Beathard was never in the 49ers organization. His grandson, CJ Beathard, was. Bobby Beathard was the GM of the Chargers. Wasn't the GM of the 49ers. Somebody says Seifert. No, it's not George Seifert. Finally, we got it. It is Sean McVay's grandpa, John McVay. It is John McVay. So this is the John McVay draft room, and that is John McVay behind Fred Warner. So John McVay was, and good job, Corey, you're the first to answer this one correctly. John McVay was Bill Walsh, was John Lynch to Bill Walsh. Does that make sense? Kind of like you have Lynch as GM now and Kyle Shanahan at coach now. You had John McVay at GM then and Bill Walsh as coach then. And John McVay is Sean McVay's grandpa. And John McVay passed away not too long ago. I think it was probably a year or two ago. Good man. I still remember talking to him early in my time covering the 49ers. He was back at the team facility. He was obviously really proud of his grandson taking over as the coach of the Rams, but it just goes to show you how small this football world is. Now everybody's guessing John McVay. Maybe you guys were on a little bit of a delay. I was a little disappointed at first. It took like a minute and nobody was getting it. I'm like, come on, guys. Like, we got to know who John McVay is. Hopefully, 40, 50 years from now, people will see John Lynch and the picture in the background, I'll be like, yeah, that's John Lynch, instead of being like, who is that? Is that Bobby Beathard or somebody else? No, it was not Bobby Beathard. Bobby Beathard was never with the 49ers organization. His grandson was, though, CJ Beathard. And, speaking of the draft and speaking of crazy small world connections, CJ Beathard, when he left the 49ers after the 2020 season, that earned the 49ers a comp pick that they used in 2022. And that comp pick was used on Brock Purdy. So CJ Beathard directly turned into Brock Purdy when you looked at the free agent departure and compensatory formula. That's a neat story. That's a neat connection. That's one that I'm going to continually bring up over the years. Beathard, what'd they say? Beathard walked so Brock Purdy could run. It all worked out for the 49ers. All right, I'm going to answer a few questions, then I'm going to get going here within the course of the next few minutes. Way more than 3 people said it. Like 45 people finally said John McVay, but it wasn't until after we got our first correct answer. Do I think the 49ers are interested in Jeff Stoutland? Well, they got one of Jeff Stoutland's players in Brett Toth. Kyle Shanahan has a really good relationship with Chris Foerster, who's the offensive line coach. So it would take a really significant pivot to move to Jeff Stoutland. That being said, the fact that they watched Brett Toth, obviously were scouting him from afar. Toth is the offensive lineman who the 49ers signed this week from the Eagles. Backup left guard and center, but he's started a few games at both positions, and he does a really good job. He came out of the military academy in West Point. They ran the triple option there, and his senior year, they barely passed the ball. The triple option is all running all the time. Army's famous for that. So the guy's a really good run blocker, but the point is he entered the NFL in 2019 without really being able to pass block. Jeff Stoutland developed this guy into a pass blocker over half a decade, to the point where he was more than serviceable for the Eagles, and now he has signed a contract with the 49ers. And Jeff Stoutland, there was a dispute there, it seems, with Nick Sirianni, and he's gone. And, man, I would not be happy if I'm the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles and I see Jeff Stoutland leave the building. I might even intervene and say, hey, maybe the head coach should leave. Keep the offensive line coach here because this guy's so good. He's been an awesome coach on a year-in, year-out basis. And a guy like Brett Toth, he was able to develop from, again, somebody who couldn't even pass block, an Army guy, a second lieutenant of the Army when he graduated West Point and joined the NFL, turned him into a lineman who's been in the league for over half a decade and got a second contract. And now he's with the 49ers. So even if Jeff Stoutland does not have a future with the 49ers staff, one of his products now is on the 49ers team. Juwan Jennings has not been snagged yet. That is right. I think that he wanted a lot of money last offseason, like heading into the 2025 season. The 49ers weren't willing to pay it. I think they offered probably something around $12 million for Juwan. He thought that he could make a lot more if he just persevered here through the season and got to free agency. And at this point, a lot of the receivers have signed, but there seems to have been more of a speed orientation to get those receivers. And Juwan Jennings, obviously, that's not his strength. It might end up being that he's one of those players who's more valuable to the 49ers than he is to the rest of the league. And if that's the case, maybe that deal in the $10 to $12 million range ends up bringing Juwan Jennings back to San Francisco. They would have a monstrous run-blocking receiving core, which is a good thing whenever Kyle Shanahan is your coach. If the 49ers were able to get Jennings back, it would be monstrous because you'd have Mike Evans at 6'5", 230. You'd have Juwan Jennings. What is he, 6'2", 6'3", ferocious run blocker. I still think that the 49ers are more focused on a speed weapon for that third receiver spot, but they could make things work if they had Evans and Jennings. You always can use a true burner just to stretch the defense and take, some of that space and elongate it on the field. And I think that the draft is probably where the 49ers are going to try to get that player. Remember, they could also use a return specialist at this point. But it is really, really interesting to me that Jennings has not yet been signed. So I'm sure the 49ers are keeping a close eye on that market. Ryan says, you got to give me credit. You said last week a top 49ers reporter, I don't even know who that was, said the 49ers weren't going to spend or make a splash in free agency. Content creators ran with it. I never ran with that. I don't even know what rumor you're talking about, to be honest. I don't spend that much time on Twitter, to be honest. Mike is the MVP of the channel because he sends me the stuff that's worth sending on Twitter. I've told you guys throughout the whole year that the 49ers were going to make splashes and had money to spend, and this was the plan. Like, I've written long pieces up on the San Francisco Standard talking about the year one plan last year, the Rams reset, right? We've talked about that for hours, how the 49ers were going to draw back last offseason in free agency, but go big on the contract re-signs for their own A-list pillars. That happened. And then I said this offseason after the reset, the 49ers were going to spend. And they have spent. So I don't think it's rocket science to cover this team. I really don't. Like, the takes surrounding this team are all over the place. And it's almost like people just want to get attention with their takes. And hey, look, click here, watch this video, do that. And it's just so outlandish. But to me, I look at the 49ers strategy and I identify patterns. I obviously talk to people too, but I could look at the finances and I could see the clues. Mike might do an even better job of seeing talent than I do. I think he does a really good job seeing who would fit because Mike is really good with coaching connections. And so we text all the time about, okay, who the 49ers might like, who might fit this scheme, these types of players. And then I look at the finances and I look at history, maybe take some hints from John Lynch, text a few people. And I think that the 49ers plans have been clear. They were going to take swings this offseason. I mean, so much of poor 49ers analysis this offseason has been rooted in the false assumption that this team is somehow far away. I'm going to give people who have been naysayers about how good the 49ers were this past year a little dosage of truth. You don't go 13-4 in this league. You don't win a road playoff game against the defending Super Bowl champs unless you've got a lot going for you in your building. Like, it's not easy to win at all in this league. It's not easy to win 9 games in this league. It's not easy to win 10. Once you start getting up to 11, 12, 13 wins, including a road playoff win, like the Joe Montana 49ers won a road playoff game only one time. They beat the Bears in Chicago in negative 29-degree wind chill. 1988 season, Soldier Field. They failed miserably in many, many road playoff games. 1983 at Washington, they lost to the Redskins. 1986 at the New York Giants, they lost 49-3. They lost a home playoff game as the big-time favorites in 1987 to the Minnesota Vikings. Of course, the 49ers of the Steve Young era, 1992 and 1993, losing twice in a row to the Cowboys. Let's see. 95, losing at home to the Green Bay Packers. 96, losing on the road to the Green Bay Packers. 97, losing at Candlestick, NFC Championship game to the Green Bay Packers. You could then move forward into the Steve Mariucci era. They go on the road and they get their asses kicked by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Early 2000s, I believe John Lynch probably still around at that time in Tampa Bay. Then they lost to the Green Bay Packers. Maybe it was the other way around. It was the Packers. Yeah, it was the Packers against Brett Favre with Jeff Garcia. Then the next year they beat the Giants in the comeback, and then they lost. Anyway, it's hard to win a playoff game on the road. Really, really hard. 49ers did it this year, and they won 13 games. And if you can do that, you've got something cooking in the building. And if you could do that, and also if you had beaten the eventual Super Bowl champion Seahawks as badly as the 49ers beat them in week 1. I mean, they outgained them by 150 yards and outpossessed them by 16 minutes. If a healthy version or a mostly healthy version of your team can do that in one season, they're going to go for it the next season. They're not going to draw back and blow things up. You know, the takes on here and on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, wherever were ridiculous. And it really wasn't that hard to sit back and see exactly how the 49ers would be thinking and what they would do. And that's why we got it right down to Osa Odigizua. Again, Mike deserves most of the credit on that one. All right. 45 minutes later, it's Friday night. That's it. We'll talk to you guys very soon. Thanks for watching. Guess what? 100,000 subs. We blew by that. We are now on Highway 101. We cleared 101,000. So thank you to all for subscribing. Make sure you do hit that subscription button if you haven't done so yet and become a member of the channel. We will talk to you all very soon.